Who is the nicest celebrity you have met? Colin Firth. I saw him sitting in a cafe with his son. Extremely nice. I waited until they got up to leave before I went and asked if I could get an autograph for my mom, who's a huge fan. He asked me a few questions about her and wrote a quite nice autograph for her. He asked if I wanted one as well, and I told him that meeting him was more than enough. I had told him where she worked, and he went in the next day and made a point to stop and chat with her. Truly a class act. Gene Wilder, but there's a story behind this. I worked at a pharmacy in the ATS and was asked to deliver medicine to Gilda Radner, Gene's wife, during her cancer battle. After a long delay to make the delivery due to issues related to the getting in touch with her doctor, I was finally given the prescription and drove up to their house to make the delivery. During my drive, I was excited at meeting one of the brightest comedy stars of the time. When I arrived, I rang the doorbell and Gilda answered. I knew she was sick, but even I was surprised at her gaunt appearance. She did not look well at all. Immediately, I realized she was very angry because of the long delay in getting the medicine to her. Unfortunately, she let loose all that anger at me. I apologized many times, even though I had nothing to do with the delays. After she finished, and I gave her the prescription, she closed the door on me. I was not upset at her, though. Indeed, I was very sad that this brilliant comedian was sick and was going through such an absolutely awful ordeal. This was an awful situation, and not at all as I had hoped my encounter would go. As I turned around to walk away from the door, I went several steps before I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around, and it was Gene, letting me know that his wife was very sick, and he apologized many times for her behavior. He then gave me a nice tip for the delivery service, and shared his gratitude for the weekend delivery and work by my pharmacy. I'll never forget the encounter, and appreciate that I got to meet both of them, even for a brief time, under difficult circumstances. Ian McKellen sat down on some empty theater steps with me and engaged in a whole conversation. It was awesome and I will never forget it. I worked at a Barnes & Noble in high school. Lines Cool J lived right next to it and would come in almost daily. He knew most of our names. Really nice guy. Weird Al. I've met him twice and both times, when he looked me in the eyes it felt like he was hugging my soul. Met him at a film screening a few years ago. I've been a fan of his since I was 8 and has legitimately an influence in my own music/comedy. I saw him when I sat down, which happened to be right in front of him. I heard him introduce himself to some older ladies who had sat next to him. Just very genuine, like, "Hi, I'm Al." I turned around and said hello, said I had just seen a show at the Greek, and said it was great, and said this is a great moment of my life, and he cracked a joke, and said something like, "Well, I guess your life hasn't been that awesome," or something like that. We took a selfie and shook hands, and it was awesome. I checked John Mulaney into a hotel room once. He wanted to pay for someone else's room, so he was at my desk for like 5 minutes while I set that up. He's a genuinely nice guy. Mr. Rogers. Absolutely as kind and gentle and lovely as he seemed on TV. I was lucky enough to spend 6 hours sitting next to the man on an airplane. I was 7. Highlight of my life. We ate lunch. I spilled on him. I thought I had ruined everything, but he just smiled and gave me his dessert. Being from the UK, until I got on Reddit, I never had any idea who Mr. Rogers was, but everything I read and see just makes him seem like the nicest guy you could ever wish you to meet, and a national treasure. We ended up with Jimmy freaking Savile. Alan Alda. I was at one of his book signings, and I was so nervous to the point that all I could say was, "I love MASH." And he took my hand for a second and made a joke about being surprised I knew about the show because I was young. Once I got past my absolute embarrassment, I realized he was so gracious and patient with me when he could have easily been a jerk. Great human being. Peter Dinklage is a lot of fun. Really cool guy. His laugh is incredibly infectious. When I met him, he seemed a bit overwhelmed by the enthusiasm around him, but he was still great. He wanted to take silly pictures with me, and I was like, holy shit, Tyrion wants to take pictures with men. Great dude. Dave Chappelle and his family live a few miles from where I went to college, and he and I frequented the same Starbucks. I ran into him about 10 times. One day he sat with me for about 45 minutes and talked about screenwriting. It was amazing. He's as down to earth as his stage persona suggests, and it's no wonder he opted to raise his family away from LA. Given that at the height of his fame, he took time out, I can totally see that. Anyone who would halt the lure of fame and money to take back their equilibrium and look after the well-being of themselves and their family sounds like good people to me. Having met Laurie in person, I can confidently state that he is one of the nicest and most humble celebrities out there. Not only is he completely happy to interact with his fans, but he also does so in a way that makes each and every one of them feel like they're a friend. He remembers names and personal details with amazing accuracy, and he makes each conversation seem like it's an extension of a treasured and ongoing dialogue. Add to that the fact that the man is outwardly hilarious, and you've got a recipe for a genuinely great guy. Warner Morris, one of the members of Boyz II Men, sat down on a mall bench next to me. He didn't know I recognized him. We talked about basketball. Michael Jordan and the Bulls were one game away from a three-peat championship. When my mom finally came out of the lingerie store, I said to him, "Well, this is the end of the road," and I walked away. I wonder if he remembers that. That is the cutest story ever. I'm laughing in embarrassment for you, but I also think it's the raddest thing you could have said to him. Well done, for real. I didn't actually meet him, but Tracy Morgan bought my younger sister an iPhone many years ago. Hers broke, and his GF, now wife, at the time lost her phone at the Super Bowl or something, so that's why he was at the same Verizon store. The Verizon employee said my sister's damage wasn't covered under insurance and my mom couldn't afford to buy her a new phone, and my sister, I guess, clearly got emotional because Tracy Morgan, who had been talking to my mom for a bit before, while they were waiting, my mom and sister had no idea who he was until my dad came in and recognized him, bought the phone for her. My mom tried to say no, but he said to just pay it forward. Brother-in-law is a pilot who gets occasional celebs on charter flights. His go-to answer is Henry Cavill's dog. Henry Cavill ranks close second due to his willingness to let flight crew pet said dog. Jeff Goldblum met his wife and children as well. They were all kind and sweet. His real-life persona matches the on-screen one exactly. My buddy is a flight attendant and met him a few months ago. Basically gave the same review. Very kind, but definitely eccentric. Took the time for autographs and pictures. Jason Momoa. He's an absolute treasure to be around. He's genuine and loves his job. He wants his fans to have as much fun as he's having. He can size up a fan and know how far to push/tease them to make them comfortable while not going too far. His personality is infectious, and I had a blast with him. John Barrowman, Captain Jack in Doctor Who and Torchwood, and also Malcolm Mellon in Arrow, is so cool and gives amazing hugs. My sisters met Sophie Turner. I had just left to go get something to eat, and she apparently lined up to do ziplining behind them. They were so amazed they met Sansa Stark and showed me the picture. Ed heard she was in town filming and that she is with Joe Jonas, and realized from the picture angle someone else took it. Asked them who took it. Some dude she was with. I laughed so hard I cried when I explained it was Joe Jonas, and they felt so embarrassed and shook. They said he took it like a champ and took their picture with her, and then small chatted a bit about stuff to visit in the city. Also met Matthew Mcconaughey at a beach bar I worked at. He came in with bongos and sunglasses at 8 PM on our busiest night and sat alone in a corner. When the drunk guy next time home turned finally and asked, "Aren't you the Mcconaughey guy?" he laughed and bought everyone drinks. Then proceeded to drink some more, took his shirt off at some point, and played bongos with band. Tom Hanks. I worked at Disneyland in the late 90s, and I saw him giving a tour to a group of about 25 kids. He was leading the tour and the Disney tour guide was just tagging along, so I could tell he'd done this many times before. Robin Williams, so engaging and generous with his time. Anne Hathaway. We were backstage waiting for her cue to go on, started chatting. She told me how she was such a klutz, and we joked around a bit. Then, when she was called on stage, she tripped hard going up the stairs and face planted, then turned around to me, and we both started laughing. She's a sweetheart and a genuinely nice person. I'm glad I got to meet her. I had a good experience with her too. I was in LA on a holiday, I'm not from the States, and saw a commotion on the Walk of Fame. I went to have a look at it, turned out Hugh Jackman was getting his star. The whole cast of Les Mis was there. Most of the people watching were professional autograph hawkers / sellers. They got given autographs but zero interaction. And noticed I was clearly just an average Joe and actually spoke to me, made some jokes, shook my hand. She came across as genuine and kind. I also happened to meet literally 10 celebrities on my US trip, and she was probably the only one who was as good looking in person. Lenny Kravitz was one of the most humble people I've met. Incredibly down to earth, laid back and friendly. Prince Charles was also pretty friendly. Would look you directly in the eye during conversation and make you feel like there was no one else in the world but the two of you, despite being constantly surrounded by others. Danny DeVito. I ended up at a hotel bar in Philly with this girl I was hanging out with and her friend. Turns out the cast of Always Sunny was filming the 10th-ish season and staying at the hotel and hanging out downstairs. So girl's friend flags down Danny as he's walking by, and he ends up sitting with us for a solid 2 hours, buys us a couple rounds, and tries to invite the girl up to his hotel room. A weird turn, but he also introduced us to Charlie Day, so I'm calling it a win. I rode in an elevator with Ric Flair in a hotel located in Atlanta. I was in 6th grade and really into WWE at the time. He struck up a conversation with me and complimented my sweatshirt. I think I got a picture somewhere. Stanley. He was my neighbor for a while and he directly wrote me letters which I now have framed on my wall. Tom Brady wasn't great. Steven Tyler was really cool / chill, but Stanley was the best by far. My aunt met Steven Tyler and said he was super chill, except she had no idea who he was, and he was just some guy who bought a lot of the musical instruments she was selling at a charity event. She posted a video of the two of them singing together on Facebook and made a comment about how she was happy that this nice musician was making enough money to live off of. I had her go look up Aerosmith videos, and she was shocked it was the same guy. Bruce Campbell of Evil Dead fame. Tall as frig and really cheerful. I was working the front desk for Newbury Comics corporate office and he and his assistant came in. I didn't even process the name when his assistant said it, just called back to the buyer, whom Bruce was meeting. Then it hit me, wait, the Bruce Campbell. Bruce is standing to my right, looming like death. He smiles, extends a hand, laughs, and asks me my name. I made the requisite boomstick joke, and he also laughed at that. Much better behaved than Juliette Lewis, who showed up so drunk she couldn't walk down the ramp in front of me. I knew Shaquille O'Neal in college occasionally. I wasn't associated with the athletic program at LSU, but had friends who were, so I ran into him often enough to kinda sorta get to know him. He was a huge goofball back then too. Adam Sandler. He is super nice. We met him at my aunt's lake house. Such a sweet guy. He brought his family over and we hung out with him for like 3 hours and we just chilled. He is an amazing dude. I kind of got that impression from his Brooklyn 99 cameo, which is a little ironic because he acts like a rude, stuck-up celebrity in the cameo, but it showed that he was willing to make fun of himself. Pretty funny scene too. Scarlett Johansson back in 2011 at a Starbucks. Super sweet and really bubbly. Thought she would come across as a beach or standoffish, partly because it was early in the morning, like 5:30 to 6 AM. Not at all, she was so nice. Made her laugh after I told her I was a huge fan of one of her earliest films, Home Alone 3, which really is one of my favorite childhood movies. She just had this charming aura about her. Nicest. Met him in the summer of 2003, so after the Two Towers, and before Return of the King. He seemed to be a genuinely humble, kind man who appreciates the success he's had, his fans, and just life in general. Also nice in a quiet, scholarly kind of way. Brad Dourif, who has played Grim or Wimtong, Chucky, and a lot of mad scientists and creepy villains. He also once guest starred in Babylon 5 and gave an incredible performance. Daniel Radcliffe. I'm not a big HP fan, but one of my friends is, so we went to see his show NJ in London a few months ago and waited in the lobby after the show ended, which was the equivalent of waiting by the stage door. He came out and spoke to every single person who wanted to talk to him, which was an honestly enormous number of people, 4 hours. Instead of quickly taking a photo and signing a playbill for each person, he showed genuine curiosity about the people he met, asked questions, made conversation, and made everyone feel like they mattered. This was at night after the show had ended, and I'm sure he was tired, yet he was still such a charming and genuinely caring guy to each person. I was a bit blown away. I wasn't much of a Daniel Radcliffe fan before this, but am now. Robin Williams. Met him when he came out to Iraq for a USO tour, 2007. Was willing to sign anything and talk to everyone. I work nights, so I couldn't make it to the USO show, but he stayed in the VIP rooms directly next to my work building. So in the morning he stayed to say what's up, show his appreciation, and even gave us a quick piece of the set he did for the night prior. Also met Kid Rock, who was cool AF. Lance Armstrong was a douche. Kelly Clarkson. The Southern Charm thing isn't an act. Coincidentally, I also met the meanest celebrity the same night, Avril Lavigne. Shout out to Blink 182 as well. In my short time working with celebrities, they were the only ones I was actually a huge fan of, and they were super cool as well. Mark Hoppus especially. Edit. Also, now that I think about it, Gym Class Heroes were super cool as well. Their singer was an especially nice guy. Hugh Jackman. Insanely nice, and he was twice as handsome in person. Met Matthew McConaughey at a Subway in Ohio when he was staying in my hometown's fancy treehouse hotel. Walked up to him and was like, "Are you Matthew McConaughey?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Cool." So he said, "You want an autograph?" And I said, "I guess." So he signed a Subway napkin for me. In a meet and greet type interaction, it would be Jonathan Frakes. In a professional interaction, I worked a related industry. The Dalai Lama, or the monks I dealt with on that day, would have to be the most polite people on the planet. In a hey I've just met a celebrity type way, Steve Irwin. Haley Atwell. Peggy Carter in the MCU. Very pleasant to talk to, and may I say even more beautiful in person. Dolly Parton. A really great hugger and genuinely sweet person. She walked into Tower Records SF while I was there putting up promotional stuff for Columbia Records, probably 1977. She grabbed me for a hug and was stoked we were exactly the same height, even though she was in heels. She asked me some questions, and it felt like it was authentic. I've met hundreds of celebrities, but she and Robin Williams were far and above the nicest. I saw Brock Lesnar in the hospital cafeteria while his wife was having a baby. He noticed me kinda staring, so he called me over and said hello. I told him my son was a big fan of his, and he replied, "Tell your son I'm a big fan of his." We shook hands, and I let him finish eating. It looked like the chair he was sitting in would crumble at any moment. Pretty much everyone I've heard, from fans to people who work with him, say he's one of the nicest guys you could meet, loves his fans, and does his best to help make other talent look good in matches and stuff. He's a private person, so that probably keeps him humble. The only celebrity I've ever met is Bill Murray. He made a joke I didn't get at the time and gave me wrong directions to the Asia exhibit inside the Dallas Museum of Art. 10/10 would ask Bill Murray for directions again. I spent a day with Adam Sandler on the set of Mr. Deeds back in 2001 as part of my brother's Make-A-Wish. Guy was really down to earth, and his entire crew were all very accommodating and sensible. As I get older, I continue to read good things about him from other fans. My sister had a minor part in a movie with Brie Larson and Rooney Mara ages ago. I was an extra. This was right before they both got big, maybe 10 years ago. They still keep in touch with her every so often, and even remember my name. Very talented but also nice. I had the opportunity to volunteer bellboy for Rafael Nadal when I was 15. After the match we were all lined up in the tunnel and the players walked past. Rafa took the time to introduce himself and thank us for volunteering. I was second in line, so I had the privilege of actually shaking his hand. George Takei. Bumped into a little Asian guy in a white suit on my way out of a theater. He turns around and goes, "Oh my I'm so sorry." Realized why the laughter from the front row had caught my attention. Adam Savage from Mythbusters. I met him at a White House science fair a few years back and got to talk to him for a bit. He was really nice and easy to talk to and does actually wear the hat out and about. I told him that watching his show with my dad as a kid was part of what made me want to be an engineer, and he actually got really excited about that. Just a super cool guy overall. Obama and Bill Nye are also very nice. I second you on Obama and Bill Nye. I met them both at a White House science fair, and they took a few of us into the Oval Office to meet Obama. They had clearly briefed him beforehand, because he knew our names and a little bit about our projects already. We got to have an amazing convo about STEM education in school and access to research opportunities for kids. Later, when everyone was milling around at the science fair, we saw a crowd in one of the rooms. Turns out Bill Nye had borrowed the PVC pipe marshmallow gun from a kid's project and was shooting them into the crowd of people. Of all the ways I could have run into him, that was definitely the best. We talked with him for a bit, and he asked if we would take a picture with him. Apparently he did that for a number of students. Class act all around. Steve Irwin hands down. I've met a few musicians and athletes who have been nice, but none were as nice as Steve. I met him in an elevator at a hotel and I walked in soaking wet after swimming in the pool. I was only 11 and I was in an elevator with Steve Irwin. Straight away he starts a conversation with me, asks me what my name is, where I'm from, and if there were any crocs in the pool, and if I see any at the hotel to come find him. He then starts talking to the hotel worker who was in the elevator with us and staring at Steve the whole time. That interaction with him still makes me ridiculously happy whenever I think about it. Nick Offerman. He came into my cafe and I tried to play it really cool and not bother him lol. When he was getting up to leave, I awkwardly said how much I enjoyed his book on woodworking, and he looked so genuinely surprised. Introduced himself to me, shook my hand, asked my name. He gave me some woodworking tips and went on his way. I ended up seeing him again at an event and he remembered me and my name. He's a genuinely kind and humble person who is very knowledgeable and enthusiastic about what he does. 10/10ths would like him to adopt me. Tough choice. I'm gonna go with the ones I didn't just meet, but got to spend some time with. Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary Fame is one of the nicest people I've ever met. Plus, he gave us Puff, the magic dragon. He told me, "Hey man, I really think we're brothers of the spirit." So I got that going for me. Next up, Kenny Rogers. RIP. Got to spend an hour with him a little over 20 years ago. Gracious, funny, and self-deprecating. Finally, I got to spend an hour with Bob Uecker, the just a bit outside guy from the Major League movies, a couple times. An encyclopedia of baseball knowledge, a fountain of old Hollywood stories. He told me about how he got on The Tonight Show with Carson and what it was like to do the old Friars roasts with Sinatra, Dean, and Sammy, and just all around a cool person. Bam Margera. Back when Jackass was a thing, and I was in middle school in about 2003, he had a signing at the local mall and my mom and I waited in line for about 4 hours so I could meet him. I had him sign a pair of skate shoes that I was wearing to school with the fat shoelaces that I put into a checkerboard pattern. He took about 10 minutes to talk to me and compliment me on how cool that was and ask how I did it. Meanwhile at school, all of the skateboarders made fun of me for wearing skate shoes and constantly gave me grief. Having a celebrity who I really looked up to give me such high praise saved my self-esteem for the rest of middle school. Being nice is easy, but Bam Margera went above and beyond.